Hey guys, Al here, Vitalize Seed. Um, no special background today or anything like that. I wanted to do a video on something that I've been thinking about for a while, and I thought if I could come up with an analogy to help people visualize deer densities and the impact that they have on the native landscape, and also the generational impact it has on the deer within that given area. So the best example I've been able to come up with, and hopefully this resonates with somebody, if not, keep scrolling. But if you break it down to a micro level, just for visualization purposes, if you took an acre and you said, okay, on this acre, we're going to put 5 cows. And every year, those cows, let's say it's evenly distributed between males and females, and they're going to have calves. And those calves, they're gonna live within that acre, and they're gonna then have calves, and it continues on without ever harvesting any of those for meat. On that particular acre, you would imagine that over time, that acre, regardless of its ability to handle browse, is going to be degraded, both from a soil perspective and also from above ground biomass perspective. Well, why is that? Well, you just simply have too many mouths on that acre that are consuming and consuming and consuming. But what else is going to happen? You're going to start to get crowded, right? You're going to have some starvation starting to kick in. You're going to have, mortality probably likely due to that. Now, when does that happen, right? 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years? Who knows, right? It's going to be determined on climate and type of browse and everything. You're also going to have social stress dynamics, right? Things are going to get really, really competitive there. But also, and I think this is really what correlates to deer, is you're still going to have some big cows. So I think a lot of times there's this idea of, well, I see 100 deer at a time, but I still got big deer, so that must mean that everything's fine. Well, no, because the impact it's generational, right? So MSU Deer Lab has a book, Dr. Bronson Strickland, who I've been very fortunate to talk with numerous times. I've got to actually interview him on Habitat Podcast with my friends Jared and Brian, and he's just a wealth of knowledge. He wrote the book Strategic Harvest Systems, and what it shows in that book is kind of the inverse of this. So they're taking deer from very poor quality areas where it's assumed that genetics is an issue, giving them ample food, and those deer are then actually reaching really good quality rack as well as body weight size. And it had nothing to do with genetics, it had to do with nutrition availability. But the inverse of that is when habitat gets degraded. So on this analogy we're using of a square grid of cows on that acre, once that gets degraded, you might not see sizes of cows in the first year or 2 years or 3 years, because those offspring were born from those larger animals that were healthier. So when that mom, that first set of offspring, when she was feeding those calves, she was very healthy because that was the first generation on that acre, right? As it starts to degrade, your epigenetic, as they were defined by MSU's Deer Lab, your epigenetic triggers switches start to go on and off. Hey, we're not going to put as much energy into body mass from deer into antler size because we're going to put that energy into survival, right? So I want to share that analogy because I think a lot of times we only use observation when hunting white-tailed deer. And we don't consider not only the impact it has on the deer themselves. I think most guys, most hunters, most conservationists do think of that. And I'm going to share a personal story with you all. I'm definitely not perfect in this, in anything, but certainly not free from mistake in this category either. It's very easy to say, we don't have enough deer. But also the epigenetic triggers and your habitat landscape. Are you seeing oak regeneration where you should be? Is your forest being dominated by maple because every young oak that tries to grow is nipped and allows a faster growing maple tree take its place? Are you seeing greenbrier browse, as I've hit on in some other videos, that's very, very thick and heavy? What are your observations while hunting? And then also, are you seeing not preferable species, autumn olive, things of that nature? Are you seeing those being browsed? I've seen areas where fescue in the wintertime is being browsed, which is not a very high preferred species. So I'll share this story with you all. So this is a buck, called him Captain Hook. You kind of see that hook on his tip. This deer in Ohio, right? So Ohio's known as a big buck state. This is a deer in Ohio as a 5.5-year-old. And I found one of his sheds. And some of that's just genetic. I mean, just being a bully buck is never going to be huge. But that deer only put on probably, maybe 5 inches. I would say probably less than that. He's about the same. Obviously, if we get a chance to harvest him at 6.5, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But it was really, we've seen this happen time and time again, where we just are not seeing the deer jump like we thought we would. And after taking some very close observations, we've always harvested does, but not quite as aggressively we has recently. So time will tell. I mean, again, it's a generational change. So you don't just harvest does one year and the next year you're going to see this huge antler growth jump. You might, for example, I have another shed sitting here. That deer jumped almost 30 inches, but he got killed about 1.5 miles from our farm. So it was quite a big jump, but he also wasn't necessarily where we have the highest deer density, because it's going to change, square mile by square mile. So something to think about, guys, is hopefully that makes sense. So when you're looking at deer densities and things, think of it in kind of that 1 acre context example that I gave you. And then also a video for another day, we'll talk about taking that, harvesting deer within that, say, square mile or whatever your property might be, that you're looking to target does or reduce doe numbers. But then how are all the other properties and all the other square miles being impacted, and are you going to be drawing deer in from there, or are they going to be drawn out from you, or maybe it's a mixture of both depending on the habitat. So those are all things to keep in mind. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully it was useful, and thanks for tuning in. Check out vitalizeseed.com for our cover crop and food plot seed options.